So today I'll be talking about Gale Primary Sources, and the subtitle is Where the Past Meets the Present. So as you can see from that little map that you see on the screen here, it's going to be about some things, historical things, and I hope to make it relevant and interesting to you as much as I can. So before I start the session itself, let me briefly introduce my company. I belong to a company called Gale. This is a US publisher based in Michigan, and we are one of the best known publishers for the library reference market. So we publish for libraries. And what that means is if you have a chance to go to your physical library, I think, most of us haven't been to the library for quite a long time now, but if you ever have a chance to go there again, if you wander around what is called the reference section of the library, where you find things like encyclopedias, dictionaries, you would notice that a lot of the books there would bear the imprint Gale or Charles Scribner's Sons or Macmillan Reference USA. We publish many, many books for the library, reference works. And increasingly, we have been publishing digitally. So we also publish ebook versions of those publications. We also collect journals and make them into databases. We also have several subject-specific databases on social issues or on literary criticism. And we also collect historical material, which we collectively call Gale Primary Sources, and which will be the focus of my talk today. This is where we digitize historical books, historical newspapers, historical manuscripts, some of them centuries old material, and digitize them and make them available online to universities like Hong Kong Baptist University. So I will start out with the agenda. I will introduce to you what Gale Primary Sources is about briefly, and I will use one of the Gale Primary Sources. Actually, Hong Kong BU has, I think, like 17 products from us just under the Gale Primary Sources series. So I won't be able to go into detail for every one of those 17 databases, but I will use the Times Digital Archive, which is a newspaper database, as the first example to show you basically how these products work like, what are the tools that are within them. And then I will go through on the slides, show you what other collections are available to Hong Kong Baptist University. You have 17 of them, as I mentioned. And then we also have a cross-search platform where you can actually search all of these, actually all but one, and I will clarify that when I get there, all but one of those 17 collections in a single platform called our Gale Primary Sources cross-search experience. I will show you how to do that. And if I ever have time left at the end, I might touch upon other Gale databases that Hong Kong Baptist University also get from Gale, which are our Gale ebooks, our social issues database, opposing viewpoints, and Gale literature criticism. But I will only touch upon these for just a few minutes at the end. So our main focus today will be on Gale Primary Sources. So I will start off with a little quiz. This is not the quiz that you'll be asked later on by Angela's team, by the way. So the answer for this will be revealed very shortly. On the screen, you see 6 books or title pages from books. And as you can see, they are fairly old titles. There is something in common across all of these 6 titles. What is the common factor? We have a collection of charts and memoirs. We have Jack Harkaway and his father and the haunt of the pirates. We have stanzas to Queen Victoria and other poems. Lansbury's Labor Weekly, Unity, Unity, Unity. Electrical tables and formulae. Fighting the traffic in young girls. Anyone want to dare a guess? You can enter in the chat if you would like to. Don't be shy. Okay, someone has responded. Oh, it's Angela. Okay. Maybe this one is a little bit difficult because actually this was a sort of a trick question. I'll give you the answer and don't be angry at me, okay? The answer is all of these titles, somewhere within those pages, contain references to Hong Kong. So it was a trick question. Nobody is supposed to get this right. But I wanted to make this point because this is what Gale Primary Sources enables you to do. You would notice that the word Hong Kong within each of these pages that I show here is highlighted in green. And this is not something I did. It is what happens when you're using Gale Primary Sources. You can do a search on Hong Kong, and right in the middle of a book or right in the middle of a newspaper article, you can find that exact word or phrase, and it will even highlight it to you in green and show it to you on the screen. So this is the real cool thing about Gale Primary Sources. So how did I do that? I used Gale Primary Sources. And we have spent many, many years building these types of databases where we digitize historical books, historical newspapers, and many other works from various universities and libraries throughout the world, and bringing them digitally to universities and institutions like yourself. What we do is we go to various holding institutions. They might be places like the British Library, they might be places like the American Antiquarian Society or the National Archives of the UK or of the US, so and so forth. And we will sign an agreement with them to get permission to digitize some of their treasures. And once we get that permission, we might go inside of their building and start scanning materials directly, like you see here on the screen. Or sometimes we work from an old technology called microfilm. Microfilm is basically like a black and white photograph of every page of a book or every page of a newspaper. And we might scan from that black and white photograph. Either way, we have a very special sauce that we apply to that scanned image. And this is really, really important. I'm emphasizing this for a reason, okay? Just so take note. We carry out this technology called optical character recognition. It's called OCR, an acronym. So what this does is optical character recognition enables the computer to actually transfer that image of a word into an actually searchable word, a copy and pastable and searchable text, which you can then use, like I showed to you in that earlier example, you can use a keyword like Hong Kong to directly locate pages where that phrase occurs right in the middle of a book or in the middle of a newspaper article, even if it doesn't say anything like Hong Kong in its title. So this is really the key point about these Gale primary sources. And this is what a lot of scholars and researchers are really, really excited about these resources because they can do searches and come up with unexpected discoveries that they didn't really guess were there until they actually searched and found the material inside within the covers of the book. Okay, so the technology again is OCR, optical character recognition. Optical character recognition, okay? All right, so I would like to start out with a demo of one of the products that Hong Kong Baptist University has. And I chose the Times Digital Archive because this is a newspaper archive. And in general, newspaper archives are the most kind of beginner-friendly products. You know what a newspaper is. You know what it looks like. You know what kind of text is on a newspaper. So it's kind of familiar. And it's also, you know, entertaining in a way because newspapers are written for a lot of people. So they don't write in obscure ways. They don't write in academic text, and they're easier to read. So the Times, or some people call it the London Times for emphasis, is the world's oldest continually published English language daily newspaper. It was first founded in 1785 in the late 18th century. That's a really, really a long, long time ago. And it continues to this day. So we have in this archive from that very beginning in 1785 all the way down to 2014. Okay, so that's more than 230 years of content. And it's often called the newspaper of record for the United Kingdom because it is, it prides itself in recording everything that happened. And it has been very, very influential. It's read by world leaders, and it has always been a very, very powerful institution on itself. But it's also a great read. So we will go to the Times Digital Archive. Now, you can just follow me, just watch me do this on the screen, or if you would like to, you can boost up your browser and try to replicate what I do. And that might be actually a better way to learn. It's your choice, so either way is okay. But just to show you how to access the Times Digital Archive from the Hong Kong BU Library, you first go to the library website. I will demonstrate this later live. And you choose the Databases tab, and you search for Times. There are several other ways to access it, but I found this to be the easiest way. You will find several databases appear in the results, and then you just select the Times Digital Archive. Okay. So I will briefly change my share and go to the Hong Kong BU library website. Okay, so this is the library website. I hope everyone is seeing my browser now. And there is a search box, and there are several tabs here. I'm going to choose Databases, and I'm going to type Times and search. And you get several databases. Hold on. This is my probably the office kind of internet speed here is actually sometimes a little bit slow sometimes. Let me refresh this page again. Okay. Okay, so we have 20 databases found for Times, and we scroll down a little bit and you find the Times Digital Archive. You click here, and I believe you would know how to do the rest. If you're a Hong Kong BU student or staff, you can log in with your SSO ID. And if you are other eligible users, you have another way to log in, which I don't know. But I am not a student, so I will just kind of cheat. I have backdoor access to to the database because I belong to the publisher, and go directly to the database from a separate tab. But once you log in from that page, you should be able to come to this page. Okay. Is there any questions? Okay, thank you for the link, Angela. Yeah, you can also use that direct link to, without searching the library catalog, to come here. And I'm going to do a search on the Hong Kong handover in 1997. So I just type Hong Kong handover, and I execute my search. Now I get lots and lots of results. Well, I get like 190,415 results, as you can see here. And these are all the numbers of each article within the newspaper. So if you kind of look carefully at these thumbnails, you would notice that parts of the thumbnails are colored in light blue. This is actually the exact article that is showing here on this page. And some of them, a lot of them are actually from the 19th century. This is because the Times Digital Archive and all of our newspaper databases by default show results sorted from the oldest to the newest. So you always get the oldest articles first, and they're not always the most relevant ones. But when you're examining newspapers, usually chronological sorting makes sense because you're kind of tracing past events. But of course, I'm interested in the Hong Kong handover in 1997. This is a little bit too much and probably not relevant to my search. So what am I going to do? actually, you have several ways to work around this. And the best way, probably the easiest way, is to look right. And you see a number of boxes here. These are all filters. So if you click on these boxes, some filtering options would appear. So you can further filter your results by publication sections. So these are the sections within the newspaper. So there are news articles, there are advertising articles, there are articles about people, opinions, editorial. That's one way. You can also limit by document type. Is it an article? Is it a sports news, weather report? You can also limit by date, or subjects, or authors, or person as subject. Or you can simply add an additional keyword to further narrow it down. I'm interested in the 1997 handover, and that happened in July 1997. So I'm just going to limit by date. So instead of all dates, you can either choose before a certain date or after a certain date, on a certain date, or between two dates. In this case, I'm going to do on, and I'm going to choose 1997. And I'm also limiting to July because I knew the handover happened in July the 1st, actually. I'm not going to limit by day, so I can leave that blank and apply the filter. And now I get 426 results. So that's still a lot because that's like 1 month worth of material, but still kind of much more manageable. And I see that the first result that I see here, because it's sorted in chronological order, is the one from July the 1st, which was the actual handover date. And it says final farewell to Hong Kong. So I might open this. Or if I want to preview my keyword, I can also just click on this thumbnail. And it will show me where my keyword appears within each of these results without having to actually open the article. So this is also a good way to kind of check around if any of these articles are interesting before actually opening them. But I'm just going to open this one in a separate tab. And this is what it looks like. Okay, so this is the article, Final Farewell to Hong Kong. And you can see the words Hong Kong are highlighted. I'm going to change the size, fit to width. Oops, sorry. I think it's still loading the page. Okay, here we go, fit to width. Final farewell to Hong Kong. So you see Prince Charles and Charles Patton, who was the final governor of Hong Kong, waving as they board the yacht that will take them away from Hong Kong. And you can see, if I zoom in a little, that all of the mentions of Hong Kong are highlighted in green on the page. So this is a cool thing about OCR, optical character recognition, which allows you, it's not going to be 100% correct, by the way. This is a computer actually reading the text. And if you want to see what the actual text in the background looks like, you can click on this little tick here. And you will see that the actual text that the computer or the system is searching looks like this. It's mostly correct, but if you look really carefully, you might spot a few mistakes like this here. But mostly for searching purposes, this is good enough, okay? Now, right now, I'm just looking at this single article, but I can also switch to the full page view by clicking on page. And this will be the front page of this particular date, because of course the Hong Kong handover was a very important event. So this is what the Times of July 1st, 1997 looks like. And you see the full page, including other articles, some on the I think this is on the Wimbledon tennis, and some on other issues as well. So you can see what other topics were reported on the newspaper at the time. And if you want to move away from this article, and if you're more interested in the Wimbledon title, for example, you can just click on that here on the table of contents on the left-hand side, and you will again get an article view of this particular article, okay? Other things you can do. On the top hand of the page, you would see a number of tools, and these are all very handy tools. So say I'm interested in this Wimbledon article, and I'm writing a paper about the history of Wimbledon tennis, for example, and I want to cite this article in my paper. The easiest way to do that would be to click on the Cite tool here, and it will automatically generate the citation and the proper format in several different formats. So we have MLA 8th edition, APA 7th edition, Chicago 17th, Harvard as different options. If you don't find your option here, another way would be to export this citation into bibliographical management tools. And if I remember correctly, I think HKBU has RefWorks. Am I correct?
We have RefWorks previously, but now we're supporting Mendeley.
Oh, you're using Mendeley. Okay. In that case, for other tools like Mendeley, you can actually download this RIS file. And this is like the common format for all of those citation management tools. And once you download it in RIS format, you can open that file in Mendeley and it will work beautifully. Okay, so that's one way to keep track of your citations. You can also send it, and you can send it to several places. You can send it to an email. And in this case, if you choose email, it will just send a link to the article. It won't send the article itself. The other two are kind of handy in that you can choose Google Drive, and it will actually send the PDF of this article to your own Google Drive. When you do this for the first time, it will ask you for certain permissions, like are you going to allow Gale to access parts of your Google Drive and so on and so forth. And you would have to click agree. But from the second time onward, you only need to click on Google Drive and send, and the article will automatically be sent to my Google Drive. Okay. And I will just show you my Google Drive just in case you're curious. Which, here we go. Sorry for the embarrassing files that you see here, but you will see that the PDF of this article has been sent correctly to my Google Drive. Okay, so back to this article. You can also download the article in PDF, or if you prefer to look at the OCR text, which is that computer-generated text that I showed to you earlier, you can also download it here as well. Or you can print it out if you're connected to a printer. Get link. This is also a very useful tool. When you want to return to this exact page that you're looking at, get link is the place to click upon. Some people make the mistake of actually bookmarking the URL that they see here on the browser, which is this URL actually works most of the time, but it's not exactly a stable URL all the time. And in order to generate a stable URL, the best place to go is to click on Get Link. And here you can copy this link and paste it somewhere else, and we'll guarantee you that you can return to this particular article. You can also do this on a search results page. So this is basically what you can do on the article page. You can also go to the table of contents and look at the whole issue of this newspaper. If it contains illustrations, you can just go straight to illustrations as well, or also look at the full citation. These are the tools on the left-hand side. So basically, these are the things you can do from the article view of all of our Gale primary source databases. So I will return to my search result. Okay. And I wanted to show you something else, which is the topic finder. And this is also important. So please remember this, the topic finder. The other important thing that I'll be touching upon later is the term frequency, but I'll start off with a topic finder. So we have like 426 articles here. And I may not have the time to go through each and one of them, those 426 articles, but I want to get a sense of what's covered. What are the topics? What are the keywords that are appearing? Here, the topic finder comes in handy. What this does, it doesn't analyze the full 426, but it will look at top 100 of my search results. And it generates this very cool interactive heat map, if you will, of what other keywords are appearing together in these 100 articles within my search, the top 100 of my search result. So you see here like Chris Patton, which is further divided into topics like governor, man, heads. And you would notice that every time I select a section, you would get search results on the right-hand side that are related to that particular section. You can go to reset, and I might find things like, oops, that's my mouse's wheel. I might find things like rain. Actually, the 1st of July, 1997 was a super rainy day in Hong Kong. So the whole ceremony was drenched in water. And there are a lot of articles that refer to the rain. So you see tears mingle with monsoon rain, or friends see last governor off on sentimental journey. Apparently, all of these rain-related articles are sort of emotional. So this is really an interesting tool that you can use as a discovery tool, or some people sometimes actually use it more as a brainstorming tool. So you might have an idea, I want to investigate articles about the Hong Kong handover, but that's kind of a broad topic. What else can I find? And by generating this heat map, you can get a lot of ideas. Hey, maybe rain might be an interesting angle to look at the Hong Kong handover, and so forth. So that is the topic finder. Okay, with me so far? All right, let me return to my slide for a moment. And I showed to you how to get to this, and I showed the example from the Hong Kong handover, and I showed to you some useful tools, the filters, changing the sort order. I actually didn't do that, but you can actually change the sort order if you want to, once you select a search result. You can also click on the Get Link button, and I told you that you can also do this on a search result page to bookmark the whole search result as well. And the topic finder, okay? So these are the tools that you can use on the Times Digital Archive and basically all of our Gale primary sources as well. Okay, so some points of, about Gale primary sources or primary sources in general. So primary sources are really fascinating because they allow you to re-experience history as it was happening. So these are really the raw footprints of history as it was unfolding in its time. You can feel the contemporary mood, the tone, the rain, the emotions that you saw in some of those articles, and make unexpected discoveries by full text searching. So here is an article that I show here on the bottom, Misery for Expats Facing Life Without the Archers. This was also related to the Hong Kong handover. You might be wondering, what are the Archers? It was a radio soap opera that a lot of the expats in Hong Kong were apparently fond of. So I thought that was kind of amusing, that angle about the handover. And you can also trace how interpretations of events changed over time. Because we have more than 200 years of just the Times, you can really trace those events by looking at different articles from different times. Some notes of caution. Primary doesn't necessarily mean correct. It doesn't mean that everything that is written on a primary sources is factually correct. Of course not. You know, newspapers often make mistakes. Sometimes they write false things. Sometimes they are people's opinions and not necessarily objective facts. So you need to, look at these articles with that in mind. You need to know the historical context to understand what is written. So the more you know about the time period and the background of the event that you're examining, the better you can understand it. I'll return to this topic later. You need to use period terms sometimes. So when you're doing a search, you don't just you can't always use the words, exact words that come to your head sometimes. For example, if you're wanting to search for articles on World War I, when World War I was happening, World War I would not be an ideal keyword because if you think, it wasn't called World War I when it was happening. It was only called World War I because there was a World War II much later. So you need to think, what would be the words that would appear in this particular time period, and try to apply those top keywords in your search. And of course, full text search here is enabled by a technology called OCR, which is really, really great technology, but it's not always 100% accurate. So you need to remember that as well. Sometimes it can make mistakes. Okay, now I'll move to my term frequency exercise. I will go to the home page of the Times Digital Archive, and I will scroll down and I'll select another tool called term frequency. And I will enter the word Olympics and hit search and see what happens. So let's try that. We'll go back to my web. I'll go to the Times homepage, and I scroll down to the bottom and I find term frequency. And I enter term frequency, and this is a graphing tool. I will enter the word Olympics and hit on search. And what happens is it will generate a graph of the number of documents from each year that match my keyword. And I'm going to zoom in to this particular, mostly the late 20th century. And what I wanted to show you is if you look carefully at the dots here, every 4 years, the dots go up. Okay, so this kind of shows you how the Olympics appeared in various years. And this is just looking at the number of articles. You can change this to popularity because some years might simply have more articles than others. And usually as a general rule, the newspapers get thicker as they get newer in years. So I might change that to popularity, which will give you a little bit more accurate reading. But still, I find it very odd that 2012 is a lot bigger than the other years. And I wonder why. Anyone can guess the answer? Why is 2012 so big in this graph? Okay, you're all shy, or you probably know the answer. Oh, hold on, someone answered. Winter Olympics. Ah, that was close. Actually, 2012 was the London Olympic year. So the Times being a British newspaper, of course, London Olympics was a big, event for them. So it's covered much more extensively than the other years. So that's why you see London Olympics 2012, lots of results from 2012. Okay, so that was the top term frequency tool. Please remember that tool. That's also an important keyword for you later. Okay, so I will go back to my slideshow. And basically, I walked you through the Times Digital Archive, and I want to show you some other databases that Hong Kong Baptist University owns. Okay, things to note about the term frequency. Before that, the graph shows the numbers of articles, not the number of hit terms. Some years may simply have more articles than others. So it may be the actual base is bigger in some places. So it's good to compare two similar or related terms rather than just one term. Okay, so those are little tips for the term frequency tool. But let me move on to what other Gale primary sources are available to Hong Kong Baptist University. And you actually have 17, and you have, these are the icons of them. And you have, I grouped them into several groups. So the alignment of this is intentional. So the first line are newspapers. You have the Times, you have Sunday Times, the International Herald Tribune, a whole collection of British Library newspapers, Illustrated London News, 5 basically newspaper databases. Then you have periodicals, things like magazines, The Economist, Punch, which is a humor magazine, Picture Post is a photography magazine, TLS is a literary magazine. China in the Modern World, Part 1 is a collection of English language magazines or periodicals published in the 19th century China, or 19th century to early 20th century China. And then you have the National Geographic as well. And then you have collections related to political history. And these are more kind of advanced level documents. These are not written for the common people often. They are internal government communications and things like that. But if that is your thing, these are really, really fascinating. You have a whole module from Asia, on Asia from the 19th century collections. Then you have 13 collections from our Archives Unbound program, which collects various smaller collections. You have previously secret documents from the US and the US Declassified. And China in the Modern World, Part 4 is actually entirely about Hong Kong. These are the colonial office papers of the British government related to Hong Kong. And last but not least, you have 2 gender study related collections. One on LGBTQ studies, which is Archives of Sexuality and Gender. And the second one is about women's studies in general. Okay. So about the newspapers, Times is the most famous one. Sunday Times is the Sunday version of Times, but it's also really rich in investigative reporting and cultural issues, book reviews and things like that. International Herald Tribune is a very strange newspaper because it was a US-owned newspaper, but it was based in Paris and it was read by all over the world. So it's a kind of a very unique newspaper with lots of Asia coverage. Illustrated London News is an illustrated weekly newspaper. Lots of great illustrations here. And British Library Newspapers is actually a collection of 70 different English newspapers from the 19th century. Then I go to periodicals. I'm sure a lot of you will be familiar with The Economist, which is a very well-known weekly business magazine. Punch is a satirical weekly magazine in the UK. Picture Post is a short-lived but important UK photojournalistic magazine. Times Literary Supplement, also called TLS, is a very influential weekly literary review magazine. And as I mentioned, China in the Modern World, Part 1 includes 17 English language literary or various periodicals from China from the 19th to the early 20th century. And then you have National Geographic. One thing about National Geographic, I put an asterisk here. I'm going to show you the cross search after this, where you can search everything except the National Geographic in one go. For very complicated reasons that I won't explain here today, National Geographic is not available as a cross-searchable item in the cross search, but it can be accessed as a standalone database. So just a little bit note on that. Then you have political history, diplomatic reports from Asia to the US and UK. You have missionary reports, periodicals, and others, all included in 19th century collections online. And as I mentioned, China in the Modern World, Part 4, are the British colonial papers on Hong Kong. And US declassified documents, formerly secret, declassified US government documents, mainly from the 20th century. Archives Unbound is where we put smaller size collections, and Hong Kong BU has selected 13 of them, all related to China and Asia in general. And then you have publications and documents related to LGBTQ movements and documents related to women's movements, feminism, and other topics. I thought I saw a question there. Could you share presentation materials later? Certainly I will. I will, after this, I will send the presentation files to Angela and Wallace, who are your librarians, and they should be able to share with you the files to you later, including the recording to this. Thank you for that question. Okay. So expanding it to cross search. Now, the great thing is you can start out with a single database and expand your search to the cross search. So I can do a search starting with the Times Digital Archive, but if I'm kind of curious, what other stuff can I find from all the other Gale primary sources available to HKBU? I can just hit a button there and go there. So let me go back to, go back to my browser. Sorry, I go back and forth in between. And here I am. Oh, what did I do here? Okay, I'm going to do a search on Hong Kong handover again on 1997, July, search. Okay, so, oh, what am I doing? Excuse me, I was supposed to be in the Times product instead. Excuse me, I need to go back to Times. Sorry, that was a mistake. Okay, I'm back in the Times, Hong Kong handover. And search, limit by date on 1997 and July. Oops. So this was the search result that I showed to you earlier. But if I want to expand the same search across all of those Gale primary sources that I talked about just now, excluding the National Geographic, I can just click on Gale primary sources button here in the search results, and it will run that same search on Hong Kong handover from July 1997, but this time across everything that's available to HKBU at this moment. So you can find various other databases. So there's a database filter here. And instead of the Times, you can also look at, for example, The Economist and see what The Economist had to say about the Hong Kong handover when it was actually happening. So this is a really a cool way to examine these materials. All of the other tools are basically the same. The one thing that's different is if I go back to my search result, instead of just newspapers and periodicals, you would start seeing other types of materials like manuscripts. So let me do a different search. For example, I might search on Kowloon. And here you would see many different types of materials. So instead of just newspapers and periodicals, you would now see things like manuscripts or monographs. These are like books or documents, and even photographs sometimes. And each of these will be showing in buckets here, what we call buckets. So you see the top 3 results for each content type. And if you're interested in manuscripts, for example, you can click on that manuscript tab and expand to all 1,399 manuscript documents containing Kowloon. I can further limit by database. I'm going to limit by the China in the Modern World product. And there are 2 parts available to HKBU, but I'm interested in the Hong Kong part. So I'll limit to Hong Kong, Britain, and China. And maybe sort from the oldest to the newest. And I can scroll down a little bit. Sorry, it's a little bit slow. Let me reload the page. Okay. And I wanted to show you something. Kowloon was ceded to the UK in 1860. And I wanted to show you a contemporary document from that period. So it's from this one, 1816, Jan and June. And the unique thing about the Hong Kong papers in China in the Modern World is that this is a very new product. It's a relatively new product, and it has a new technology applied, which is called handwritten text recognition. This is only available in the Hong Kong papers that you see here, but I might show you one of the search terms, and you would notice that instead of it being in type, it's actually reading handwriting. So you see the Kowloon Peninsula and Kowloon shown here, and this is actually a deed of lease. Initially, the Kowloon Peninsula was leased to the UK, but in the same year, they actually changed their mind and made it into a permanent cession. So you can see the actual deed of lease here, and with the keyword Kowloon highlighted within a handwritten document. You can also look at illustrated works within this document, and I found an interesting map. I'll expand it for you, of Kowloon. It looks like a Chinese map, and all the names are in Chinese. And I think Baptist U is somewhere around here, if I remember correctly. And it said something like, around here, there are only mountains. It's a barren place or something. So Kowloon looks very different today, I think because land has been reclaimed a lot, but this was an old map from the 1860s that was owned by the British government, so they can look at their newest acquisition. Okay, so that's how you use the Gale Primary Sources. If you go to the Gale Primary Sources cross-search and you go to the homepage, you can all see all of the different databases that are available to HKBU. And you can also click on any of these icons to simply jump to the individual databases instead. So I just clicked on the Women's Studies Archive, and here you can also look at the Women's Studies Archive. And sometimes looking at the individual databases can be really helpful because you have things like lists of collections that are included in this product, which gives you a lot of background material to understand what the materials in here are about. And some of these are fairly complex. So for these more complex products like Women's Studies Archive, I would very much recommend that you look at the Explore Collections page or the Research Tools page here, where you can read essays written by scholars that give you the background information to understand some of these primary source material. Okay, so I'm very, very much conscious of my time. So I shall return to my PowerPoint. So I showed to you how to go to the cross search from the single interface. You can also go straight to the cross search from the library website. You can look at this later. It's very simple. And things to note about the cross search. It returns multiple content types, including things like manuscripts, monographs, newspapers, and periodicals. Initially, the results show the top 3 results for each content type. And I didn't mention this, but newspapers and periodicals usually tend to get more hits because they cover a broad range of topics, and the results are for the article level. So each of the newspaper articles are separated and returned as separate results. That's why you tend to get a lot more number of results for newspapers and periodicals. Okay, context is really, really important. I mentioned this earlier, but I wanted to show you an interesting example. This is an example of a search that I did on the Tokyo Olympics in the 1960s. And this shows you an actual article of Japanese swimmers being banned from swimming pools, from practicing in swimming pools in South Africa. And it's a kind of a shocking article. Japanese swimmers were initially banned, but then they received an apology saying that Japan is hosting the Tokyo Olympics, so they should be made an exception and be allowed to swim in the South African pool. And all of this won't make much sense unless you knew that during this period, South Africa had this policy called apartheid, where only white people were basically able to use things like swimming pools, and people of color were excluded and discriminated against. So the point I wanted to make is when you're looking at primary sources, you can't know too much context. You need to, the more you know about the time period, the more you know about the background, the more you know about the context, the better you can interpret these materials. Context is everything. So that's a really important point too. So as I showed to you earlier, to learn more about each resource, I'm not going to repeat this, but you can go to one of those individual databases and click on the About page, or click on the Research Tools to read contextual essays, or click on Collections to see a list of collections within the product and read essays about those as well. So this is the screen that I showed to you earlier, except this is from a different product, Archives of Sexuality and Gender. When you click on Explore Collections, you will be able to see various other collections, the various collections that are included in the product and what they are about, each of them. Okay, so the rest is just additional information. I mentioned that we also have ebooks. And actually, ebooks are also available to HKBU as well. I won't go through this because of the time, but just to show you how to go to the ebooks. And you have various other ebooks. And these are really helpful in understanding the context of history, because you also have a lot of historical reference works available from HKBU. Okay, I'll skip this part and go to the wrap up. So, important wrap up. Number one, Gale Primary Sources is about historical resources in digital format. And products are things like newspapers, monographs, books, or a mix of multiple content types. Some of the products, like the Archives of Sexuality and Gender or the Women's Studies Archives, are actually comprised of multiple collections. Not all, but most of the products can be cross-searched. The only exception for HKBU is the National Geographic product. Everything else can be cross-searched. And the search is enabled by optical character recognition, OCR, full text searching enabled by OCR, or in the case of the Hong Kong archive, you also have handwritten text recognition. And you also have visual search methods like term frequency. You remember the Olympic graph, the topic finder, that colorful heat map. And it's important to use period search terms, historical search terms sometimes. What was the language that they used during the period that you're looking for? It also helps to know the historical context of the materials. And you can find some things about the context by looking at material like the About pages, the research tools, the collection descriptions within the product. Or you can also look at reference works like Gale eBooks or any reference works available from your university. So I think I've used up almost all of my time, but if there are any questions, I'll be very happy to answer them.
Thank you for your sharing and demonstration, Masaki. It's very
You're welcome.
informative, and I learned a lot from the Gale's primary sources, especially from the Times Archive, and also how to search for multi criteria, especially like the time frequency search function. Thank you very much for your sharing. And examples like using Hong Kong Hanover in 1997 and also the Tokyo Olympics are very good examples for our students to try on these databases.
Thank you. I hope some of you would find these materials interesting and want to give them a try. I really hope so. These are really fascinating historical material, and they can really return to you interesting, unexpected results. So please, try them, and you can feel free to share what you find.
And you have already pointed out an important point that even though primary source is a good source for a good scholarly source to help with the research, but there may be not 100% accuracy in the primary source because for the factual, it may be true, but students be reminded that you may have to cross-check with other resources, other content, other materials to prove your viewpoint, prove your research idea.
Absolutely.
Mm. So for students, do you have any questions regarding Gale primary source at this moment? Feel free to type in your question in the chat box. Mhm. Oh, I have a direct message from a student. If you want to use Gale primary source, I found it in the my answer is yes. May I just repeat your questions in the chat so that everyone can see your questions? Miss, I think you are Miss Neil. So her question is, if she wants to use Gale primary source, can she find it in the HKBU library? My answer is absolutely yes. And in my chat box, you will see that I have already shared the link of the Gale database. And at this moment, we have already subscribed 17 products from Gales, right, Masaki?
17, yes. Some of them are multiple modules in the same product. So yeah, depending on how you count. Yes.
Yeah. Yes, you can see that in the chat box, I've already uploaded the linkage of the Gale databases available at HKBU library. This is the direct access link. If you are off campus while you are studying at home or in other country, you may need to log in with your student ID so that you can get access to what the library can provide for you, student. So thank you for your questions, Neil.